J. Michael Straczynski, folks, please. This is a spotlight panel that is all entirely on him. So if you guys just have some questions, they were involved.
The favorite thing I've got really good. I've worked in television for years. I can do the finger all day long.
Which one?
I work single. I work alone. Thank you, though. A nice man. That is Jill. Can you go again a moment ago? Yeah. Yes, sir?
Simple question, why Babylon 5?
Why existentially? I really wanted to tell a story. Yeah, I just refine that question just a little bit. The name, or you mean whatever I wanted to mean?
The whole concept.
Why the whole concept? This is my first cup of coffee.
I haven't mine, so I apologize.
That's okay. Well, any writer wants to have their own voice to be heard, and wants to have their own, story to tell. And we're not someone else's, hired gun. The problem working television is very often you're working for someone else's show, and you're like, an itinerant worker. You go from, farm to farm to farm, from the show to that to that. You want to have your own story to tell, whereas one vision and one voice. And I mean, obviously you go too far with that, where it's one vision, one voice, and you're like, I'm Volk ein Deutschland, and then you're really in trouble. But for me, it was important to have a chance to tell my own show, my own story, and having grown up on science fiction TV shows, that's what I really wanted to do. And I worked on procedurals before then. That's why, like last night when all the cast went off, I had dinner with the big mockers here at Phoenix Comicon, I was hanging out the fan panels. Because I come from the ranks of fans. I'm as rank as any of you. So for me, it was important to have my own science fiction. I just wanted, as a kid, I had certain things that I wanted. I wanted to write Superman someday. I wanted to write Spider-Man. I wanted to have my own TV show. I wanted to write some movies. And people around me said, you're out of your mind. Yeah. But oddly enough, all the things that I wanted to do as a kid are the things I'm doing now. My father saying, "You'll never make a living in comic books, Wrong. So that's the answer to your question on an existential basis. Beyond that, you're on your own. Holding up the program there.
Hi there. A ton of questions. First of all, thank you.
A ton of questions.
I would have a ton of questions, but I'll limit myself. First of all,
2 kilotons would be okay.
thank you for bringing intelligent, serialized television to the U.S. We wouldn't have 24 Heroes, Lost, Breaking Bad, Mad Men, any of these things without what Babylon 5 started. My main question is, looking back at the series now, with a post-9/11 view of the world, things like In the Shadows of Doom, for example, where Gordon is subject to indefinite detention for all of about 6 hours, prompting the mass insurrection among the command staff, seemed almost quaint. How do you think the show would have been different if it had been done in 2003 versus 1996?
Well, a lot of the show politically is as relevant now as it was then. Particularly if you look at things like indefinite detention and the Clark tendency to ignore civil rights by creating a fear of a much greater object off to the side of the civilization. But when I mentioned last night at the smaller channel I was on, that after we did Babylon 5, I got a call from Bruce Boxleitner, who was at the White House with his wife at the time, Melissa Gilbert, who was then the president of SAG, Screen Actors Guild. And in the middle of this, she was there to meet with other representatives and lobby on the White House. And in the middle of all this, Karl Rove came rushing into the room and said, right past her, right to Bruce, so I wanted you to know Babylon 5 is the best science fiction show ever made. And the president thinks so too. Which really depressed the hell out of me. And we did, he learned a lot from it, but then President Clark was the bad guy. And yeah, we did kind of set in place the template for the 5-year arc by Damon Lindelof, who was a casual friend of mine, mentioned that when they sat down to do Lost, they used the Babylon 5 model to create the arc for that story. Anyway, so the funny thing, of course, is that everyone's doing it or trying to do it. I had a meeting I networked not long ago where I was talking about a 5-year story that I wanted to do, 5-year arc, and the guy who really didn't know my background well said, well, you know, a lot of people come in here and say they want to do 5-year arcs, but they don't tend to pull it off really well. What makes you think you can do it? I said, I invented the motherfucker. Yes, question.
I just had a list a few minutes ago about all the things you wanted to do as a kid. And you done everything listed. What's next on the list?
What's next on the list of things to do? That's what I'm figuring out now. I think probably the main thing is to get better at it. I think I'm at a point now, I'm just now kind of starting to figure out this whole writing thing. And you laugh, yay, as though I jest. But as you get older, you get to understand how much you don't know about writing. And I think I'm now kind of getting an understanding of how stories can be told in a more interesting fashion. So I think now comes the last stage, which is A, getting much better, B, owning my own stuff. This past July, Pat Tallman and I launched as well. Studio GMS, which is our own company to create movies, TV shows, comic books, web series, games, the whole catastrophe. And we have our first TV show going ahead with the Wachowskis. They'll be on Netflix next year. We're doing our first movie that we were going to be shooting in the fall, but may have to get pushed to next year for actor availability reasons. We're doing our line of comics, or Image Comics, the Joe's Comics in print. 10 grand just came out last month, the second issue, which I have an advanced copy of here. Ooh. Everybody go, ah. Everybody go, ooh. It's good to be the king. And it's got, I'll have this at the table. I'll be doing a signing right after this, I think at like 1:30 down the dungeon. And we want to page through it and look at a preview for Sidekick, the next title to come from Joe's Comics. And so it's now owning my own stuff and really having my own voice again, where if there's a movie to be made, it's our movie. If it's a TV series that gets made, it's our TV series. We make it our way. If there's any dumb studio notes, they're my dumb studio notes. And to see how far I can take it. My original plan was to slow down this last couple of years, but we thought of the whole Studio JMS thing, and that was just Pat's name for it. I figured, well, let's go for broke. So I'm actually writing now, I'm busier now than I have been in my entire life, which is great and friggin' tiring all at the same time. So that's the answer to that question. Way in the back there in the white, yeah, you. Ah.
Hello. I got a question I'm going to get. Think way back to when you were first doing this, and a few of us had internet, and we had like boards, I think we called them back then. There's only a handful of us on them.
Logging out with a 28.8 modem on
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Question, a twofold question. Would that really be on the board every so often under JMS?
Which board?
I think it was just the Babylon 5 board, because we were trying to catch up. I was this mad scientist, I was like freezing embryos. It was like, oh, damn it, I missed this episode. How do I keep caught up on this thing? And every so often, everybody.
You were a mad scientist freezing embryos?
Yeah, I'm an embryologist.
In intentionally willing people, or are you taking them? Breaking into houses and.
Yeah, I actually got paid for that.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
resolve that.
Back to this.
Yeah, I
don't know if it was you or not, because I think someone listening to you. Because I love how every so often everybody get on the beds of, the secret societies and the this and that, the religious bent of it. Every so often the person on the day has to go, I just wrote a damn story, get over it.
That may not have been me. I'm never sure I used to use the words get over it. You must understand that the internet, on the internet, knowledge and access is a form of currency. There will always be counterfeiters among us. And there were a number of folks out there pretending to be me. And I caught some of them. And they did not do well. So I cannot vouch that that was me unless you can tell me exactly what the board was or whether I can't tell you.
Way back in the early days when there was.
I can't help you, lady. I can't. I got nothing. I never saw you before. I don't know what the board was. I don't know. I can help you. No, sorry. A sensible question. Sir.
Okay, the board was the username.
Don't start with me. I don't even know what she's referring to.
I'm afraid I don't.
I thought she would know the logic, didn't I?
Back before the first season of 25 that he finished airing, you posted on Usenet that a woman had come up to you at a con and kind of scared you by saying, well, based on what we've seen so far, it's apparent to me that you probably do this and this and this. And you claimed at the time that she hit most of the major points that we touched on the mark.
Yes.
Would you
I had her killed immediately.
be willing to state now that it's all over, what exactly it was that you had right?
I can't remember what I had for breakfast. Well, I can't do the general outline of what that conversation was. Yes, a woman had a question come to me and say, based on A, B, and C, I predict you're going to do X, Y, and Z. And she was pretty much correct. But there's nothing wrong with that. If you do a detective story properly, all the clues are there. So that if you rewind the tape at the beginning, everything you need to figure it out was there in plain sight. So consequently, all the stuff was there. And you've got a whole bunch of really smart people, which is you guys watching the show, each spinning off in a different direction. Sooner or later, someone's going to figure out the right combination to open the lock. So I gave her great props and had someone drop an anvil on her immediately. Red shirt.
I'm just curious.
You certainly are, sir.
Yes, I am. Here's a flaw. Anyway, with the advent of, say, Bumpy Season 9 or the X Factor or the X-Files Season 10 comics coming out, now that you've got your own comic company in the end, is there any future for Babylon 5 either on television or running stuff into comics so that news fans can get some type of closure to the unresolved plot?
Well, first off, there can never be closure to the unresolved plot lines because what I did with B5, very specifically, was I wanted to tell that 5 years worth of history. You take, for instance, the 5 years of history in Germany up to, say, Hitler coming to power. A lot of stuff happened after that 5-year history, a lot of stuff happened before that, which are focused on what happens in this slice of time. So there were specifically things that were set up that were going to pay off down the road. It's not like the universe stops with the last episode of Sleeping in Light. Those characters are still alive and are still going on. Those threads are still alive and still going on. I never wanted to resolve all the threads. And if I never did resolve all the threads, it would be counterintuitive. Yes, that doesn't gel with me. As far as doing other comics or TV shows in the B5 universe, Warner's has the TV rights to the show, and I have the film rights, and we were kind of the loggerheads, and they're not in any hurry to make new stuff happen. And we tried to negotiate back the rights. I'm still trying to negotiate back the rights to the TV side of things. And if we get them, then that's a conversation to be had at that juncture about whether we do more or not. Part of me says it's great to go back and revisit that universe. Part of me says, leave it the frick alone. You did it right the first time, don't touch it again. So I kind of go back and forth about the whole thing.
Yeah, I wanted to see how far.
Let's see. Way in the back row, man. Green shirt.
Hello, and thanks for being here with us. you sort of, from the perspective of the fans, pioneered or re-pioneered sci-fi focused on characters. You made sci-fi about people before it is about the tech and all the rest. Since then, it seems that everyone has sort of gone your way, whether it's with shows like the reimagined Battlestar Galactica, or even all the superheroes, Batman, Thor, and others. Could you tell us a little bit about that? How you view the landscape of sci-fi, and what's your take on that? And have people come to you specifically trying to feed off of you, whether it's Ron Moore or others? Can you delve into a little how you influence what we all like here?
Well, it's kind of, for me to say here's how I influence it, and here's how important I am in science fiction television. It's almost self-aggrandizing. It's true, of course, but better if I answer the first part of your question than the latter part of your question, because that's for others to determine in terms of the legacy of what the show is. Probably going to work home. In terms of the characters and the character-based storytelling, again, I must understand I'm a fan of science fiction and a fan of good storytelling. And it made me crazy as a fan to see that whenever in science fiction shows in the past, people put on, the spandex uniform or whatever it was, they flushed away their humanity. They became about the plot. It was all plot-oriented storytelling and the device or the threat of the week. And they never took science fiction seriously as something for well-rounded characters. There was the science person, there was the person in charge, and they were defeating this big menace, and they might have a line or two that was meant more like a laugh line, about some characteristic they might be annoyed by. And why aren't these people? And the Trek universe made me crazy because they said we had to be perfect people when we hit space. We're never going to be perfect. If we were perfect, we're dead. When we go to the stars, we're going to take with us our flaws, our eccentricities, our nobilities, our stupidities, our callousness, our kindness. All those things will go with us. And if I ever get my own show someday, if I can almost laugh thinking about it, I'm going to do a show where all those elements are still there. Our humanity is still intact, for good and for ill. And we really pioneered a lot of that stuff. And a lot of shows afterward picked up on it, which is what you hope for. You hope that your word doesn't go into the ether and disappear and have no consequence. And so that's, when Ron did the pilot for Battlestar, he sent me the script, that's the one I thought of it. When Damon did Lost, as I mentioned, he wanted sort of based on the BFI art, and you want that. It's a great compliment. So I'm hoping to see science fiction continue to evolve, continue to change, and be more character-oriented. It's hard right now because, as I mentioned the other day, the networks just don't take science fiction seriously. And it's hard to get them to move. There really aren't that many space shows right now. And I've had networks say to me, literally, well, look, the show has to be set on Earth because if it's happening somewhere else, the audience won't care. Verbatim. And really? You can do a TV show set in Newark, New Jersey, where no one's going to care about what happens, and that's okay. So it just, I'm boggled by what I see. And you would think, most of these are younger guys in their 30s, 40s, who run networks, and they would come up with shows like this. But they just have this block. When you mention science fiction, they get confused and they fall down. Think about the best of all. So I'm hoping that Sensei, the show I'm doing with the Wachowskis, which is going to take this even further. Imagine the guys who did The Matrix with those 12-story brains, and Cloud Atlas, which is an amazing piece of work, combined with the B5 approach. We're going to do some stuff that is some seriously weird shit. There's stuff we got in mind that would just blow your mind. It's all of that sort. She's pointing at you. How much are you paying her?
Quick ones.
just saying,
Oh,
are the TV rights hung up with that?
yes.
And was there any discussion about doing anything different than Brand New Day? Spider-Man?
Was there a conversation doing anything different from Brand New Day? No, that story was handed to me by Joe Quesada. So this is what I want you to do. Basically unravel your entire 7 years that you worked on the book. And stupidly, being a team player, I said, okay. You know, and live to regret it.
I stopped reading it after that. That was an atrocity.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I don't disagree with you. Who's fucking around with tricord?
You have chosen poorly.
Always plugged in, not mine.
Alright. Yes, ma'am. Back over there.
I'm just wondering, is everything you've done and like script doctoring and your own comics, your own films, your own television series, what are you proudest of? I know it's like picking between your kids, but what is the message that you feel you've gotten across that you are most proud of to have your name on it?
What message?
Yeah. Or what is something that like you just immediately guess, this is me, this is like everything I am is in this, and I'm the most proud of it.
Leaving aside B5 is the obvious answer.
Yeah.
Probably the thing of which I'm most proud, as most evocative of myself, would be Midnight Nation. If you haven't read Midnight Nation, it's a 12-issue. It's a very personal story, and that book has a lot of morality questions that it raises, ethical issues, and issues of paralysis. And that's probably, if there's any one thread that goes through my work over and over again, if I'm listening out, that's true, I gotta stop it, is the issue of free will, choice, consequence, and responsibility. We are told on a regular basis, you know, you can't fight City Hall, you cannot change the world, you cannot buck the system. The flip side of that being, you don't have any choices. I don't have any choices. I have to do my job. I have to go to stay in this job and stay in this neighborhood and work with my family and do things I'm responsible for doing and that people want me to do. I have no choice. Yes, you do have a choice. You can fight the system, and you can win if it's worth it to you to try. And that, so I'm a stubborn pain in the ass. And I've learned, as a kid, I was a scrapper. I used to get beat up all the time, to the point where I just learned not to give up. We moved 21 times my first 17 years. So every 6 months was a different school, different neighborhood, different kids. And when you're the new kid on the block, and you got a funny last name, they tear the shit out of you. And there was one school I was beat up virtually every day. And after a while I learned, look, I can't win, but I can make sure that you don't win either. I wish they'd just pound me into the ground, and they'd walk off, I'd be mouthing off, you know. They'd come back and they'd pound me some more, you know, and they'd walk off, and I'd still be mouthing off at them. And I would wear them out. They used to get tired of hitting me after a while. They couldn't kill me, and they couldn't shut me up, you know. So I just learned, you fight back, you fight back, you fight back. And, you know, if your circumstances aren't what you want them to be, change them. If the world isn't what you want it to be, change it. Get up, take responsibility, move. And if there's any one thing in my work and in my life, that's, you know, pretty much it. You can make whatever. On Wednesday, this coming Wednesday, I'm going down to Southwestern College, one of my 4 colleges that I went to. Last night she booted me out after I got my second bachelor's degree. They said that the system wasn't set up to handle a GPA and negative numbers. True quote, by the way. And what recently they're giving me an honorary AA. It's a junior college. What is it? It's honorary AA. I'm speaking at the commencement thing. The reason for which I heard back from some people who were at Southwestern College, with their many years ago, to say that the paper was about to publish an edition, the college paper, about those running for re-election on the board for the college. There's a point to this, trust me. And that was not being favorable to those who were in power. And so those who were in power shut down the paper on the eve of the election, like about a week ahead of time, by denying them funds to publish. So they decided some obscure little rule that you have to get bids every year on printers as an excuse to say, well, you can't print. It's petty, bureaucratic bullshit. But they were using it to be tyrannical. I think we had the upper hand. And they were trying at the paper to get money to publish as one issue. And there wasn't time to set up a proper charity to donate money. And they were strapped. They were $3,000 some odd short of what they needed to publish the paper. And word of this reached my shell-like ears. And I called them up. So I hate tyranny. I don't care how petty it is, how small it is. Tyranny, we don't get along. And I said, how much do you need to publish it? They gave me the number. I FedExed them out a check the next day. And they put out that issue and bent the entire shape of the election in the right way. Moreover, many of those who were responsible for this, once the article with all the information came out, were later indicted on corruption charges. Those who were elected in their place and put in their place are bringing me down there specifically to say, here's AA. Thank you. There are a million chances every single day to make a difference. You have to be aware of them, conscious of them, seek them out, whether in your own life or people around you, your friends, your family, those, whatever it is, you can change the world if you choose to do so. If one person with a bullet can change the future in Dallas, and in Memphis, and the Ambassador Hotel, and with how much more one person with an idea change the world? Yeah.
So, total change of topic. You seem like you've been lost in the Davis Massacre. What's your take on interactive storytelling in the future of interactive?
As far as games go in general, I'm the worst guy in the world. When it comes to that, like role-play games, like Call of Cthulhu, that kind of stuff, I just ignore the rules and do what I want to do, and I don't game much anymore because it's a huge time sink. I think we're on year 2 of Babylon 5 or year 3, somewhere on there, where I got so caught up in Doom that I posted online. If you want to get the rest of the season storylines, give me the cheat codes for Doom now. Put me in fucking God mode, let me get over this. See, I think that games should come with a comfy chair mode. You know, where you go to that level and hit the thing for comfy chair mode. The demons bring you a comfy chair, you sit down, fight each other, you watch it, you walk around, see the really cool stuff. That's the next level. You wouldn't want comfy chair mode. So, I think that we're looking at a convergence of interactive and television, and we haven't quite found the right paradigm shift for that yet. I think that one motif for this will be where you can take Star Trek as an example, which we all know that language. Where if we're watching the show and as you're watching the Enterprise come to this planet, you get the information about it, you go down, the game components for that episode are being downloaded simultaneously into your system. So by the time the episode is done, you have all the meshes and the character backgrounds and new missions that will take place. You live in that world, live in that adventure for 7 days until the next episode downloads. They can play in that. I think that's kind of where things are starting to go. I don't know that for a fact, but I feel that. There's one more shift coming, but I'm like 6 months from figuring it out. There's the problem with the tyranny of the known. There's this great, remember the Buck Rogers serial? There's this great moment when the ship is going down and you gotta evacuate, and says, Buck says, you get your anti-gravity belts, you get these little silver belts, like the anti-gravity belts. Get your ray guns, they get ray guns. Get the portable radio, and they get this box. Because they knew what a radio was. And they were limited by that knowledge. They couldn't conceive of a radio this size. So we're still within the construct of the tyranny of the known. And that's right now holding us back. And once someone's gonna figure it out, then we'll see what happens. So way off to the side. Way the hell at the very by the wall. Yes, yes.
Okay, so Jeremiah sort of fell into the ether and everything. And
Was pushed into the ether. Yes, by me.
Well, I was wondering, is the second season ever going to be released on DVD, or is that just, because I know that there's bootleg DVDs available, but I'd rather actually, buy legit ones.
I know that MGM provided Amazon with these direct DVD where you can go online and order it from Amazon. They can then make fresh DVDs and send them to our official.
I have it.
You have it. He has those. So bring it to his house tonight. And steal that and the embryos. And then we'll talk to her. Yeah, Jeremiah was just a nightmare of ridiculous proportions. It was MGM wanted, Showtime, which is a network, wanted this really dark, mean, vile, nudity-filled, harsh language, coarse, post-apocalyptic show. And MGM wanted a cute, fuzzy, nice, family-oriented post-apocalyptic show. And they could not work it out between them. So I was like caught in the middle. And they had allowed certain members of the cast to have titles which caused them to believe that they were kind of running the show. And every day was a war of attrition on that show. It was just probably the worst experience. I mean, Crusade was bad. This was over in 13. This was 2 years of putting my face in a blender. So it was, I was so glad to see that show when it was done. I actually stood in the middle of the facility up in Vancouver and screamed, "I'm free" at the top of my lungs. It was just awful, just awful. You sir with the camera.
My wife's a high school English teacher, and I'm affected by it. We both enjoy well-written items. Being a writer yourself, I'd like your opinion what your favorite Babylon 5 strip was. The one that you're most proud of, or maybe there's 2 or 3 that are kind of equal, but which episode of Babylon 5 is your favorite from a writer's point of view?
From a writer's point of view, my favorite episodes that I wrote would be, Sleeping in Lights, the obvious choice, Severed Dreams, and Intersections in Real Time, because that one was structured as, a play, essentially. It was a 3-act play.
Yes.
We'll wait.
It's for you.
It's a question from a caller.
First one was a Star Trek communicator, now a woman in a Star Trek uniform. Who's thank you? To this day, they're giving me a hard time. So probably Intersection, because that was the one that was a real challenge to do a 4-act play, and just 2 characters in a room, and do it in real time. So that each episode happens in real time, and the networks. Warner's wasn't sure this would even work. They said, you can't just do a play, so trust me, this will work. And so that, as a sheer writing exercise, was probably the happiest thing I did. Yes, sir.
Hi. Now you're in the studio, is there any chance that you could acquire and bring to completion global frequency?
No. It's not my stuff.
Well, I'm saying you want it.
Which one? It's good stuff, but this is due to my own stuff. I own my own stuff.
All your own stuff.
All my own stuff, yeah.
Eventually though, maybe?
More and I'll send you.
They give you a lot of money for it.
Not you, but the guy right behind you. Well, I gotta find the directions. Nothing personal. I mean, it's like I find individual. Yes.
So you're a fan. Who are you a fan of today?
Does it have an off button? You're trying? There's a Starfleet uniform, you can't handle a cell phone? Who am I a fan of? I'm a huge fan of the guys who do, Stephen Moffat is like astonishing. I watch Sherlock and Doctor Who, and I saw the season finale of Doctor Who the other day, and my first thought was, he is so good, we need to kill him as soon as possible. Just frickin' brilliant, and the Sherlock show, I'm just in awe of how good that is. I like Dexter a great deal. Like the Borgias. I am the only straight person that I know who watches Project One Way on a regular basis. I can't help. It's a really good show. There's any writers in the room. It's a really good show for any writer to watch. And I see the looks in your eyes when I'm saying that to you. It's a mixture of horror and wonder and terror all at the same time. What happens in a writer's head is kind of invisible to the world, like happening inside your head. On that show, you get to see all the things that writers do to destroy themselves acted out in textures and fabrics and sequins and zippers. Where you see a person who can't listen to the client, who is so caught up in his own ways, his own, this is what I do, that he can't go beyond that. This is what I do, and they can't step out of the comfort zone. That when they start to get to a certain point where they're almost there, they begin to self-destruct. You see all the things, all the shit that writers do and actors do and directors do made manifest. The inability to edit, all these things are so for me as a writer, I just enjoy the hell out of it. And plus, when they're changing the models, it's a pretty cool sequence too, because you get to see it. So, yeah, that's my guilty pleasure with Project Runaway. You with the black shirt with the red thing on the front of it.
I wasn't going to say this because you told the story, and I had a question for you, but the story that you told about moving multiple times, having a funny last name, getting beat up all the time, I'm glad you told that story because I had a very similar childhood. I moved like 23 times before I was 18. My last name is Slothor. I mean, just had like very similar things happen. So thank you for telling that story. It really means a lot to me. The question I have for you though is when you write, especially for the comic books, you do an amazing job of bringing adult concepts into those characters but yet still making it accessible to younger readers. A good example to me is the most recent the most recent Superman issue.
Earth One.
Yes, Earth One.
Earth One.
Right, thank you. Where he's struggling with sexuality. Does that come easy to you, or do you really have to work at that?
Sadly, it comes easy.
Well, that sucks. I didn't want to hear that.
A lot of writers with that kind of comment.
So he created that.
I think it's important to mix up your box of tools of different things so you're always playing with, so that you have the funny stuff, you have the serious stuff, you have the adventure stuff that kids can like, and the harder stuff for adults. But for me, I write the things that intrigue me, the things that just get caught in my filter. What's interesting is that how many of you have read the second Earth One books?
I love them.
Yes.
There's a scene in there where we talk about Clark's cat. And I've heard from more people that they were in tears. How many had the reaction when they moved by that story? That's why I like cats. And I was looking at my cat and writing the story, and I thought, how can I really get the reader to understand A, how alone Clark is, B, his tendency to save those in need, and see that may not last in the long run. So I have him see this as a kitten, he saves this kitten's life, which is also a metaphor for the saving the woman in the apartment next door to him. So we're also doing a metaphor and a parallel at the same time. And then seeing the death of that cat and burying it on the moon. So you can see it every night. I'm just a softie. So it's hard to say where it comes from. It's just there. But I never have a hard time working it out. It just comes to my head. Yes, sir, way the hell in the back. Captain America, sure.
I love your Make the Spider-Man run. That was incredible.
What do you think of the current run by Dan Slott? And would you ever go back to work for Marvel?
I never slam any doors. Well, actually, I do slam, that's a lie. The hinges come off. I really have not had a chance to read Dan's run. It's by my bed along with 10,000 other comics that I need to read. But I hear it's really good. And Dan's a great guy. He's a nice guy. He's a good writer. So I'm aware of the whole Doc Ock thing that's been going on, but I haven't actually read it. But I think it's an interesting take that he's done. So I'm very happy with what he's doing. And as far as the future, who knows? Many things are possible. A few things are likely. A couple things have already happened. So Wayne with the blue shirt.
Joe.
Sir.
I understand you've been planning Twilight. Lensman.
Yeah.
Is it? Isn't it?
I was hired by Ron Howard to adapt Lensman, and we did a good job of it. Well, Ron was happy with it. But Universal decided that there wasn't enough name recognition for Lensman to justify the cost, which would be over $100 million. So it went, they put up on the shelf. And I'm not sure if even the rights have expired or not. That's where we're late. Sir.
Well, I'll part of this question. What is your opinion on the one off of Peter Parker, the Ultimate and the ASM universe? And you have done the same thing?
There's a question of killing off Peter Parker in both universes. Because I'm not currently reading as much as I should be in those areas, I don't have enough data for an informed opinion. I like Harlan Ellison, I believe you're not entitled to an opinion, you're entitled to an informed opinion. And I don't have one. So I wish I could have a better answer for that, but I don't. Great shirt though, by the way. Ma'am over there. Yes.
What advice do you give for writers?
Don't. No, funny thing is, if a person can be discouraged from being a writer, they should be. Because it means that the level of commitment is not there. A person who really wants to write cannot be dissuaded from this. It cannot be turned aside. Because they know that their survival is contingent on telling stories. So, understanding that, you then have to really work within, okay, what advice do they need to hear to get them from here to there. If a person, can hear the music in their head, you can say to them, make their characters more real. That's all they need to know. Don't push your characters, let them push themselves. To a person who doesn't hear the music, you give them notes all day and all night, and it won't matter. At risk of repeating things I've said at other conventions, the most important thing for any nascent writer is simply to follow your passions, to follow your interests, and write the stories that matter to you. I know people who use market analysis. This is what's selling right now in the marketplace. This is what they're publishing right now. That's what I should be writing. Horseshit. By the time it's in bookstores or on television, that process began 6 months or a year or 2 years ago. So you're seeing what was hot to buy 2 years ago. The industry has moved on, so you write to what's being done now, you're 2 years behind the curve. The only thing you have of merit to sell is your own unique perspective. The moment you try and write like somebody else, the moment you try and look outside yourself for inspiration, the moment you let your friends, your family, or the market dictate what you should be writing, you're done. Fuck it, you just pack it up, because unless the hardest thing is to sit there day after day at a keyboard by yourself and write. And it's hard enough as it is, but harder still if you're writing something you don't believe in. That's the nightmare scenario. And you have to ignore the voices of those who not just want to tell you what to write, but those who don't believe in you. I've again recounted this elsewhere. I call it the tyranny of reasonable voices. Your friends and your family, those who don't want to see you get hurt, who say, don't risk, don't take a chance. What if you fail? Don't move to LA. What if it doesn't work out? Because one, they are genuinely concerned about you. Two, very often there are people who in their own lives did not take a chance, did not listen to their own voice, did not put themselves out there, and convince themselves, as we were saying earlier, that they don't have a choice. And if you are perceived to have a choice, and you act on that choice, and you create a better life for yourselves, then that calls them into question. It makes them wonder, did I do the right thing? So rather than have that question up in their head, they'd much rather say to you, no, don't do it, don't try it, don't embarrass yourself. And you have to be, honest to God, a pain in the ass to be a good writer, because it means you have to listen to yourself above all else. You have to put yourself behind a keyboard at all times. You've got to fight to prove that you can write, fight to survive. It's a mean, vicious process. But if you stay true to yourself, stay true to the vision you have, and have any talent at all, eventually it'll work out. I honestly believe that. To this day, I tell every writer, just listen to the voice back here. Not the voices you're hearing, the voice back here. That'll always lead you in the right direction. That's the advice that I would give. Superman costume.
Hello again.
It's you again.
Yes. We were talking about how you have a knack to humanize larger-than-life characters like Superman with the cat, and my favorite was Brave and the Bold when Girls' Night Out, when Wonder Woman, Zatanna, and was it Batgirl go on a Girls' Night Out. And I was wondering, was it your idea to actually put the seed for the name Oracle in there? And also, how much liberty does DC Comics or Marvel give you with the storylines and their characters?
My deal with both DC and Marvel when I work with it is leave me the fuck alone. I write what I write. And so the Brave and the Bold stories were examples of that, where they just said, do whatever you want. And there was only one issue, one you referenced talks about how Batgirl got shot the night before that they had to deal with that. The only one I got where there was some question that came up with the editor on the Flash one, where it was back in time World War II. Yeah, I know exactly what it was. Yeah, how many read the Flash Brave and the Bold that I did? Okay. Flash goes back in time per accident, breaks his leg, can't run. And he finds himself back in Europe during World War II. And this goes back to the human question you mentioned earlier. And he comes across the Blackhawks, who are on foot, they're stuck, fighting their way out. And he's this weird looking costume, but he's obviously an American. At one point, the Blackhawks are in this little house, and Germans are attacking, and they're shooting, and Flash finds a bunch of bricks and throws them to the window, knocks all of them out with super speed and bricks. And the lead Blackhawk, grabs him by his lapel and says, "What the hell is wrong with you? This is not a game. They're shooting at us, and we shoot back at them. We kill them before they kill us. That's what war is." And Flash is like, I don't kill, it's not what I do. We're at war. You do what you're supposed to do, or I will fucking kill you. And he has this quality, what do I do? And he realizes, and takes off the uniform, finds a spare bag with some clothes in it, and puts on a GI uniform, basically being a part of the army at that point. So the Flash cannot and does not kill. Barry Allen, in wartime, in the uniform of his country, can and will kill. And I had a montage showing, that action going on. And DC didn't want to put a gun in Barry's hands. And I went to the top. Dan? He had a gun in his hands, but then was done with it. So that was the only time they ever got in my face on that one note. He was having a gun in his hands. But that goes back to the human question. When is the right time, when you authorize, to kill someone? How does a comic book character's code of ethics about not killing hold up in the middle of a shooting war? Those are the questions I love to explore. And that's what keeps me going as a writer, is a chance to do those sort of things. So as a consequence, they leave me alone. I don't get notes on Superman Earth 1. They just say, they know well enough, I will bite them if they give me a So if you hire me, you know what you're getting. Just leave me the frick alone. Let's see other questions. Yes, sir. Yeah.
How do the about looking at infographics and stuff like that. In your own mind, kind of what hasn't been explored or at all, like TV, movies, sci-fi, now, what would you more like to see more out there?
This is what hasn't been covered yet in television film. My theory is that television film is about 20 years behind print science fiction, as a rule. And if you look at the stuff that Philip K. Dick was doing, things that are really on the edge, that's what I'd like to see more being done now. When they do science fiction, it has to be very straightforward, procedural, easy to explain, time travel, space exploration. But you take the work of Tom Dish or Phil Dick or others who don't begin with the last name D in their last name, you will find that there's this whole panoply of the New Age science fiction, the New Wave science fiction, that is much more thoughtful. I would love to see more of that being done. To see science fiction as more than just a gadget, more than just a MacGuffin, more than just a methodology. So I hope that in time, maybe in my lifetime, we'll start seeing more of that. I doubt it, because we have, again, the Guardians of the Gate, at Universal, which is, at Universal there's this black buildings, huge tower where people go in, and all the executives are there. It's kind of like the monolith in 2001, but lowers your IQ when you touch it. Once we get rid of those guys, then we'll see what happens. Glove hand.
Once you said, good writers steal, bad writers borrow. And I was just wondering what a couple of your favorite sources were, and if you ever took an idea just because you wanted to make it better.
It's not conscious. I think that you don't plagiarize in any way, but just in terms of absorbing methodologies and tactics and techniques. I've learned a lot of methods and tricks from people like Norman Corwin and Rod Serling and Petty Chayefsky and others, which I use on a daily basis, but it's not like I took this story and then wanted to manifest it in a different way. There's a fine line between inspiration and theft. What was the line? I'll get there eventually. Imitation is a sincere form of television. So that'll spread out one. Writers to succeed, you have to have a good toolbox full of stuff. When you start off as a writer, you've got a screwdriver and a pair of rusty pliers. That's all you got. You can only make so many things. But as you learn from other writers and watch other writers and understand how they approach a story, you begin to add more tools to your toolbox that lets you tell more ornate, interesting tales. So for me, it's more a matter of acquiring tools than acquiring specific stories. Back there with the hat.
Thank you, because it plays into what you said about borrowing and stealing. Since you did this sort of silence in space motif with BAP 5, it's become the sort of the hallmark of sci-fi authenticity for everything that's followed. I wanted to know, who'd you steal that from?
Science.
Specifically, was there any science before, media before you, which inspired, which used that sort of?
Well, I was inspired. 2001 is the obvious answer to that. When we sat down to do Babylon 5, my first agenda was we must make this as scientifically accurate as we can, whether it's sound in space or it's rotation to create gravity, the way the star periods can move this way than that way because of how the physics work. We did the math. We worked out how many rotations that station does, which is 1 per minute, by the way, to give it that rotational spin to create gravity. I'm a science fiction fan. I'm not a soft science fiction. I like the science part of it. So if I'm going to do a science fiction show, it needs to be science. You can't just make shit. I've heard people at the network say, it's science fiction, you can do whatever you want, it doesn't matter if it makes sense or not. As a science fiction, you make it whatever you want. No, you can't. It has to make sense. It has to be logical. It has to be justifiable, rational. And that's why we had that. Thank you. Yes, sir.
I think the iconic the reason why they don't understand science. And that's the core issue of just our society and not having science ignorance. Where in on the education front, I don't really know if that was into that or just into the stories. And I mean, that does inspire a lot of us to get into working.
Yeah, I always encourage everyone, to pursue scientific endeavors and be more accurate. I'm a big believer in teaching science in schools and evolution, not that other stuff. Yeah, I think it's very important. And you're right. I think executives don't have a background in science, therefore they don't, want to understand it. How much time do I have left? 5 minutes? Okay. Yeah. Right.
You're considering an audio play of New York.
Yeah. Yes.
Say it's a story about some point,
Well, that's it. It's still in my head. I was going to go back and tell more Crusade stories. That's in my head. So that's different. At this point, Crusade doesn't belong to me. It belongs to Warner Brothers. So I really can't do anything with it without their permission, and it's going to happen. But we can't do the audio versions, however, that we're going to do with the last book of What the Hell Happened to Crusade. We have time for 3 last quick questions. So, with the guy way in the very back row. Yes, you, sir.
Getting back to the science of science fiction, I heard a story quite a few years ago about NASA approaching you about the star theories.
Yeah, true. Yeah, it is. In fact, I ran into Lee the other day. Is she here? Yeah. Where's Louise? Oh, she's in the room. What part of here are you talking about? I mean, we know she hasn't died. She's like, Con, I saw her yesterday. That was the point. Yeah. But at least she's with NASA, and she said that, what happened was, a number of years ago, NASA called me and said, we're looking for a design to use for a space forklift. And none of our designs work, but we like the star theory. We borrow it. I said, sure, but its condition is you've got to, call it a star theory if you make them. It's been kind of in and out of the process for a number of years, and we worked with those engineers. Said that it's still in development. They take their time. But that eventually they're going to keep going with this, and they want to talk to me about it some more. So that hopefully someday we'll see star theories come over the earth. Two more questions. They have to be really, really, really freaking good questions. And so if they're not, we're all going to laugh at you. The worst putting their hands down, you're a brave man. You, sir.
In Babylon 5's run, there was a video game development called Fire.
Yeah.
It's all you talking about.
The video game? No, it's dead. No, it's not a very good question.
That's the end of one I worked on.
Yeah, there was no.
With Andreas.
Yes. It's dead.
He's getting fully seated.
No. Starfleet person, where are you? Is dead. Yes.
What do you know about the new project you're working on with the Wachowski brothers?
Thing with the Wachowskis, it's called Sense8. We have a 10-episode. The cough is the last thing to go. Well, actually, I'm the last thing to go. But 10 episodes from Netflix. And it's about 8 characters around the world who wake up in telepathic contact with each other. So, we're shooting the show in Nairobi, China, India, Mexico, and 2 other countries. I see you. How they react to each other, how they get over their paranoia, and chase them down and kill them because their next step is human evolution. And, it's how they deal with each other and what does that birth of humanity going to look like for these characters. So it's a science fiction series with a touch of fantasy element to it. Last question, we're done. We're done. We're done. Thank you for coming today.